So I am so happy to have the experts in the house this morning, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves a little bit, and then they will launch into the workshop this morning. So Scott?
All right. Thanks, Ann. Appreciate it. As Ann indicated, I'm Scott Seeger. I'm the Dementia Care Specialist with the Aging and Disability Resource Center of Central Wisconsin. And as we go through today, we'll just reference it as the ADRC. Now, our ADRC supports and serves the counties of Langlade, Lincoln, Marathon, and Wood, which I know there are other counties in your 7-county region that are not part of our service area. However, there are ADRCs in your counties as well. I have been with the ADRC since March. I'm a COVID baby, if you will. Started my orientation and my work remotely, and as you can see, I'm still in a home office, so that hasn't changed dramatically. Prior to the ADRC, I spent 15 years within the Marshfield Clinic Health System as an outpatient social worker, and then prior to that, I worked in long-term care. And I'm happy to be joined by my colleague, Meagan Fandrey, today. And well, I'll get started, and hopefully she will be able to reconnect with us here. So we're coming today with this Dementia Friendly Communities initiative, and really what it is it's a global initiative to bring dementia awareness to our communities. We represent the Central Wisconsin Dementia Network, which includes the ADRC, the Alzheimer's Association, as well as other community partners and volunteers. The information we're going to share today is hopefully going to be helpful for you in your role in the library so that you can better serve and support people who are living with dementia as well as their caregivers. But also the awareness is going to help you on a personal level, is our expectation. So again, this training is part of an initiative that brings dementia awareness and something that allows us to make Central Wisconsin more dementia friendly. The purple angel that you see on the screen in the top right corner is something that is universally recognized as a dementia-friendly community symbol. It represents a guardian angel that oversees what's happening for people who are living with dementia, their family, their caregivers, the community partners that support them, including the agencies like yourselves that's taking this initiative to bring awareness to yourselves, as well as how and what you take away from this awareness to bring back to your community. The globe that you see in the background was added as a way to represent how this has an impact globally, and this awareness initiative is actually something that is happening across the world. So the globe was added to represent the impact of dementia and the awareness initiatives that are occurring everywhere. There is a window cling decal and a certificate with this symbol on it that will be offered to the organizations and businesses that make a commitment to continuing the awareness initiative. And that decal is positioned in a window of agencies and businesses that have gone through this training or this awareness initiative. And again, they're making a commitment to continue the initiative. So as we do our job, and as you visit agencies and organizations and businesses in the community, this purple angel symbol will be something that will be more recognizable. And again, it's something that we have a strong stake in bringing this awareness to the communities. It's not going to happen overnight. It is something that is been ongoing under the Wisconsin Dementia Redesign that started in 2013, and it will continue for many, many years into the future. And we're really glad that you're here with us today. Even if your boss forced you and you're here under duress, we're still really appreciative that you're here with us today and hope that there is some takeaway information that is valuable to you. So I want to start with a question, and I don't know, Megan, are you back with us now?
I am back. Can everybody hear me?
All right. Sounds good.
All right.
So we're going to start with a question, and it's maybe not what people expect, but how many of you have never met or never known anyone affected by dementia? And you can either type in the chat or you can speak up if you have access and control to your microphone. But how many of you have never met or never known anyone affected by dementia? At some point, whether it's professionally or personally, you've met or known somebody affected by dementia. The impact is significant, not just for the person who's living with dementia, but for everybody in their circle. It could be an acquaintance, it could be a friend, it could be a very close companion. It typically affects everybody. Another question. This one might be easier for people. How many baby boomers are retiring each day? They're averaging about 10,000 baby boomers that are retiring. So what does this tell us? Well, it tells us that our population is aging. And we're going to look at some demographics related to 65-year-olds because typically that's the average age for retirement. So when we think about how many baby boomers are retiring each day, we're going to kind of capture in the 65-year-old range. So we have two maps here on the screen. And I apologize that you may not be able to read each county, but each county is identified here. Hopefully you know where you live and which county it is, represented by just the location, and you don't have to read all of the information. To give you some kind of baseline, right dead center is Marathon County. It's the large geographical county by space. So that gives you kind of a point of interest there in the center of the state. So why is it important for us to better understand dementia? These maps, which show color changes from 2015 to 2040. Now, 2015 is where we have the most comprehensive or accurate information that we have, our DHS and our powers that be have come up with. DHS is the Department of Health Services. So the different colors, though, tell us a story. The story is that the demographics of people 65 years old and older is changing. And it's dramatic. As you can see, in the next 20 years, and now my math isn't off because 2015 was 5 years ago already, so 20 years from now, in 2040, there is a dramatic shift in the color on the map from green to blue, which represents the aging population in our counties, and the dark blue, which covers almost all of northern Wisconsin, represents a dramatic shift in people 65 years of age and older. So just to give you some numbers, in 2015, it was estimated that there was about 15 to 18% of the population in Marathon County, again, right dab smack in the center there, who were age 65 and older. And then I'm going to pick on Langlade County, which is to the kind of top right of Marathon County. Estimated in 2015 that they had between 20 to 24% of people living in that county who were 65 years of age or older. Now, this is where it starts to get a little concerning with relation to dementia, because as we look over the next 20 years, the numbers increase. So they're expecting that in Marathon County, there will be about 25% of the people who are 65 years of age or older. And Langlade County is looking at upwards of 45% of the people in that county are going to be 65 years or older. The biggest risk factor as it relates to dementia is age. Why is this important to us? 1 in 10 people over the age of 65 has some form of dementia. Marathon County had about 2,500 people in 2015 that were documented to be living with dementia. That's not the families that hide this or take care of their own. These are documented people living with dementia, was about 2,500 in 2015. The estimates show that that number is likely to double in the next 20 years. So 5,000 people in Marathon County living with dementia. That may not sound like a high number. However, it is actually quite high, and that's a concern for us as we look at the aging population. Awareness and education about dementia is going to continue to be very necessary. Some other numbers just to look at again, so you can see the 4 counties that our agency supports. In most of them, you're looking at an increase that doubles next 20. So this is something that we all need to take some ownership with. As I'm talking about some of these figures, and as Megan and I go through some of the things that you as a group need to be considering, we also want to encourage you to ask questions or save questions that we will be addressing at the end. This is intended to be a learning opportunity. So as you think about things, we want you to either write that question down and save it, or feel free to ask questions as we go, whether it's a question you have about something we're talking about, or clarification that is needed about some of the information.
Hey, Scott, we do have one.
Yes, please go ahead.
And it's from me. I am just curious, is the aging Wisconsin population projections similar to the projections of other states, or are we unique in this very blue projection?
Well, we're not unique in the fact that baby boomers make up a huge part of our population. The demographics do look different depending upon each state. So I can't give you exact numbers, but I can tell you that the concern is nationwide. We have an aging population, and we're really not prepared at our current state, not state like Wisconsin, but the current mode we're in for education, awareness, and taking care of people. Across the nation, we're not prepared for the aging population. So the numbers will vary depending upon each state. Obviously, as we think about retirement and the state of Florida, they're probably far ahead of where we are. But as you can see by the map, when we look at northern Wisconsin, that's also not all that, concerning from a perspective of what do people do when they retire? They move to Minocqua, they move north, right? So that's not uncommon for us to see that changing demographic based on what are people doing when they retire. So there will be pockets across the country where we definitely see the numbers are higher, but as a whole, nationwide, we do have an aging population, and whether it's a large area like northern Wisconsin or a smaller area in a particular state like Tennessee, they are all going to have to address the same issues of what are we going to do to help support people who are aging and maybe living with dementia. So some other numbers to be thinking about and processing. In 2015, again, this is when we had the most up-to-date comprehensive numbers. There were about 115,000 people across the state of Wisconsin who were living with dementia. That number across the country is almost 6 million people who are living with dementia. The estimates in the next 20 to 30 years is that there will be greater than 15 million people across the country. Again, a number that is doubling. The areas are going to be dependent on what is drawing people. But in Wisconsin, they estimate about 250,000 people across the state living with dementia. Now, to put that number into perspective, currently, the full population combined in Langlade, Lincoln, Marathon, and Wood counties, and again, I'm choosing those because that's the 4-county region that we serve, but the total population right now of everybody in those 4 counties is 254,000 people. So if we think about the estimate for 250,000 people across the state of Wisconsin in the next 20 to 30 years who are living with dementia, if we moved all those people to all of the existing properties in our 4-county region, everybody is living with dementia in our 4-county region. I'm leaving our county, just so you know, because I don't want to be one of them. So that number is staggering and it's concerning. Dementia is currently the 6th leading cause of death in Wisconsin. I'm sorry, in the United States. The Alzheimer's Association did a study from the year 2000 to 2018, and they determined that death from heart disease dropped by 7.8%, where deaths associated with dementia increased by 146%. Now, those are current numbers from 2000 to 2018. And if our population of people living with dementia across the country is going to increase from 6 million to 15 million, what do we think that tells us about deaths related to dementia? That number is going to continue to increase. Every 66 seconds, so about every minute, somebody else is developing dementia. As we sit here today, we have 25 minutes that have passed since we've been chatting. 25 more people have developed dementia. To that first question about how many of you have never known or never met anybody with dementia. Currently, the estimation is there's about 16 million Americans who are providing unpaid care to someone living with dementia. Now, unpaid care means it's a spouse, it's an adult child, it's a neighbor, it's a friend, it's somebody in that informal network of supports. 16 million Americans are providing unpaid care for people living with dementia. This number doesn't include the professional caregivers, those caregivers that work for an organization or they work in a care facility. So dementia is touching everyone, and it touches everyone in a different way. We need to be, yes?
I have a question for you from the chat.
Please.
In thinking about those 16 million Americans who are providing the unpaid care, is there a projection for what that will look like in 2040? Will the professional care field have, or does the professional care field have the support to grow to accommodate Or do you think in 2040 there will be more need from unpaid care?
Well, yes, unpaid care is going to be dramatically challenged because currently the professional caregivers are already working beyond their capacity. So the initiative to bring that awareness, to get people to understand that this isn't a disease that people have control over, that's going to be significant on all levels to encourage the wraparound support services where it isn't just a handful of people, because everybody's going to need to take ownership and embrace this purpose, this cause, because as we see now in the professional capacity, there are not enough caregivers as it is to meet the needs of the people that are needing support. And that's why the narrative needs to change. That's why the communities need to be more open to adjusting and adapting so that we can support these people. And this falls perfect into the next bullet point here. 70% of people who are living with dementia are still living in the community. 70% are living in the community. That's a significant number. And it's something that oftentimes gets overlooked because oftentimes these people are hidden in plain sight. We may not know that our neighbors or friends are living with or caring for somebody who's living with dementia. Because right now, there's a lot of negative stigma, there's a lot of fear, and so people want to avoid. They don't want people to know that things are happening. So the numbers are staggering for the people that are right next door, that are shopping right next to you, that are coming to activities, that are visiting the library, and oftentimes they're in the early stages of a dementia type disease process. And so we need to all do a better job. This is something that we're going to change. I'm confident in. It's going to take time, and it's going to take everybody's willingness to participate in this. We're going to change. You're going to change. We're all learning in different ways, but I'm confident we're going to learn to embrace this. And your awareness that you take away today really is going to have triple the effect on what you can bring to the people around you. What I mean by triple the effect, professionally, in your roles as professionals within the library system, you're going to open doors for people. This awareness is going to be significant as we bring more businesses, more organizations, more agencies to the table. Beyond that professional capacity, you are also going to have some takeaways here that you're going to be able to use in your personal lives. You're going to be able to help support family. That's the second piece. So you've got professionally, now you've got the support to your own individual families, and then also as a community member. So now we've just captured 3 capacities that you can bring this awareness to where you work and where you live. Slowly but surely, we're going to get to a point where people are comfortable embracing dementia instead of pushing it away and being fearful of it.
I have 2 questions again.
Please.
One of them was, What do you think the average number of caregivers per person with dementia are there? How many people touch that person, do you think? Professional and unprofessional.
Well, the numbers oftentimes go underreported because honestly, many people don't see themselves as a caregiver.
Mm-hmm.
So if I make a phone call to check on my grandpa or to check on my dad to make sure he took his medications today, I may not see that as a role of a caregiver. So those numbers are terribly underreported. And also, for loved ones that end up in a care facility, the spouse or the adult children no longer see themselves as a caregiver. But to the contrary, if they're overseeing the care of that loved one, they are absolutely still a caregiver. So the numbers are terribly underreported. Specifically, in some of the literature and things, and Megan, please jump in if you have some more. I would be, venturing somewhat of a guess, but I would be saying 4 to 6 caregivers per person that's living with dementia, based on information, that I read about some of those statistics. Megan, please feel free to add to that.
I would agree. I think that's an estimate, but I think with the literature and just what we see in terms of families that are coming to the ADRC caring for a loved one with dementia, I think that would be an accurate guesstimate.
And again, the role of the caregiver is even within individual families looked at very differently. And so that's part of the initiative when we support and work with families, is to also help them understand that because one person is doing this much work and the other person is doing this work, which maybe is nowhere near as much as the first person, they're still all caregivers, and they still do have an important role in supporting that person living with dementia.
Yes. And on top of that, the second question dovetails with that. You've been talking a lot about family and support in different levels of interaction. And this question asks, do you think that there may be a change back or a move back to intergenerational living situation?
Yes, I personally do. And one of the things that we've talked about in a lot of our professional capacities is there's a lot of people that ask about, well, what are people who are of Asian descent doing right, because they're not reporting the same level or same number of people living with dementia. Now, this is my opinion alone, so full disclosure, but they are still a culture that takes care of their own, and that's very important to them. So it makes sense to me that it's underreported because they are living within their family dynamic and they're taking care of their own. Yes, multi-generational. Kids are helping support grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles, and they're taking care of people because that's what is important in their culture. There's the old adage that it takes a community to raise a child. Well, I like to say that it takes a community to support and keep someone living with dementia safe.
I'm writing that down. Thank you.
And again, this is where we all play a part.
We absolutely do. And I'll add on to the living situation. Just in it feels like a long time that we've been living in this pandemic, but in the short time that we've been living in this pandemic, that is a choice that some families have made. Perhaps their loved one was living in a facility, and because of the restrictions on how often they'd be able to see their loved one as the pandemic was starting to come down in the United States, just in conversations that I've had with families and in different trainings that I've been a part of, webinars that I've been a part of, there has been a little bit of a movement that some families have chosen to move their loved one back home during
Right.
this time of the pandemic, and they've tried to, between different family members, between maybe some paid supports that come into the home, they're trying to support their loved one at home so that they still are able to see them, which they wouldn't be able to do perhaps if they had them in a care facility, especially as we near the winter months, and those window visits, those outdoor visits are going to be more of a challenge. So even just in this time that we've been living in the pandemic, we've seen some trends that way.
Yes.
Yep, and I can personally testify to that within my family sphere. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So that has been something that we've seen. And, you know, just to kind of, as we talk about this next slide, as Scott shared these statistics of how many people we have aging and turning over 65, and the percentage of those individuals that will be affected by a form of dementia until there is more research and a cure or prevention found, that is the reason in itself to create a dementia-friendly community. Because as those numbers increase and we learn that so many of these individuals are still living in the communities, whether on their own or with family members, that is where we play a role as community members. The goal here is to develop an educated, understanding community, which accepts and supports people who are living with dementia and reduces the social stigma that has long been associated with memory loss and with cognitive decline. This initiative strives for a more accepting community that will ease feelings of fear and isolation for those that are living with dementia and their caregivers too. And that is what helps make it possible for people to live well with dementia. Again, to reiterate what Scott said before, upwards of 70% of people living with dementia are still living in the community. This means that they are not in an assisted living or a care facility. They're doing their shopping, their banking, and other activities like going to the library right next to you, especially in those early stages of the disease progression. And then perhaps with some more support, maybe with a caregiver or a companion as the disease progresses and they're needing a little bit more assistance. A dementia-friendly community will help promote a sense of independence where people can find their way around comfortably. They can access business environments without fear, regardless of any physical or cognitive impairment. The dementia-friendly community also fosters these same social networks and other opportunities for people to easily find additional guidance and support when they're needing it. Creating this community where people who are living with dementia are met with an understanding and a support will involve effort from us all here today, as well as others, like businesses, community members, cities and municipalities, medical professionals, law enforcement, first responders, and aging service professionals too. We all have a role to play. Part of developing this dementia-friendly community is being more aware of changes that are normal to occur as we get older and how that differs from possible signs of dementia. As we age, it is normal to experience changes in our abilities. So some normal, typical aging can involve making an occasional poor decision. That's something we all do. We might overspend when we're trying to follow a budget, especially when we're on fixed income in retirement, for example. So that could be making an online purchase of unnecessary items, or choosing to go out to a supper club when really your budget really supports more like a Burger King or McDonald's type meal. It could be missing an occasional bill. Maybe you forget to pay a car payment or a credit card bill. It could be forgetting the day or forgetting an appointment. Maybe you need to check the calendar or the phone or the computer to confirm that. And this is very common, especially as people retire and have much more flexible schedules than they ever did before. Or if they're working at home when they previously worked somewhere else, it can be really challenging to remember what day it is. So again, that in and of itself is a normal sign of aging, normal sign of stress even. Difficulty finding the right words occasionally. That can be another sign of normal aging. One of these great comparisons that was told to me about the aging brain at one point was comparing the brain to a filing cabinet. Now, as you age, you're having more and more experiences through life, you have more knowledge, and you're filing that all away in your brain. And you have more information stored there. So naturally, it can take the brain longer to retrieve the needed information when you're asking the brain to do so. So for example, this might mean naming all your children to get to your grandchild's name, which is where you intended to be all along. So that's a good example of that. Misplacing things can also be a normal part of aging. This might be losing things from time to time, such as your glasses or your car keys, but then eventually retracing your steps and finding them later. Maybe after you've already bought a new pair of reading glasses, but the point is that you still found them and you were able to retrace your steps. And once you find them, you can remember how that happened and kind of laugh at yourself a little bit. So that can happen. All normal parts of aging and nothing to be concerned about in and of themselves. A lot of times after I say that, as I'm talking to a group, I have like a confused look because a lot of people might think that some of the things I just mentioned are actually early signs of something more significant. So if those changes are considered normal in and of themselves, sometimes people are wondering, well, maybe I don't really know what dementia is then because I kind of thought what she just said were signs of dementia, okay? Not uncommon. What dementia is it's a general term actually, and it describes a wide range of symptoms that are associated with an overall decline in memory and other thinking skills. And the key is that it's significant or severe enough to impact a person's ability to perform daily activities. So people with dementia might experience memory loss, specifically with their short-term memory at first. Difficulties with communication. This means talking to someone, understanding what another says, or trouble joining conversations. They may have challenges with thought. This could include difficulty with solving problems or safety issues if they're not able to fully think something through. They may have trouble navigating or finding their way around. And this can even be a familiar place, somewhere familiar in their neighborhood, like a store, or the library that they've been coming to for years. We may see changes in behavior, personality, and mood. They may become someone that's been very different from who they were previously. And they may have trouble with planning and organizing. This could include following a recipe or the steps to do something that again was previously very familiar to them. Again, if any of these are severe enough to impact their daily life, their daily functioning, then there is cause for concern. And this is a really common question that we get often. But just want to see if you guys would like to add into the chat, or if you again have that function to unmute yourself and would like to say something. What is the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? Does anyone know? I'll just give you guys a few minutes in case anybody has some ideas and wants to add that into the chat or share with the group.
I see a few answers popping in here.
I see them too. Thank you, Anne. Yes. So someone asked if Alzheimer's is a subset of dementia, and someone else said Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. You are both absolutely right. Thank you for sharing that and putting that out there. Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. A good analogy to compare that to is, what's the difference between lasagna and food? Your response, lasagna is a type of food, right? Or what is the difference between marigolds and flowers? Marigolds are a type of flower. So Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. Great job, you guys. That was awesome.
Here's another way to look at it. Dementia is an umbrella, and underneath it are the different types. Dementia can be a result of a number of diseases, including Alzheimer's, Lewy body dementia, vascular dementia, frontotemporal dementia, and other more rare types. And then there's also the complexity of a mixed dementia, which we see as kind of the puddle beneath the umbrella. The mixed dementia is complicated because there could be signs of more than one type of dementia. Alzheimer's is, of course, the most common. And so many times you will hear people use Alzheimer's and dementia interchangeably. But again, Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. We also see that a lot of times families just say it's Alzheimer's. If they hear the word dementia, they'll say it's just Alzheimer's, when in fact it may be formally diagnosed as something else. And again, the takeaway here is Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. Now, most types of dementia are progressive, like Alzheimer's disease, which means symptoms will gradually get worse over time. And how fast those symptoms progress really depends on a number of factors, including the individual themselves. Each person is unique, and how he or she experiences dementia will be different. There are issues related to your education, related to your socioeconomic status, related to where you grew up and having access to medical care, proper nutrition. There are a lot of things that factor into how dementia may affect one. The cause of dementia and whether or not it can be reversed depends on what is going on. And believe it or not, there are some reversible dementias, or instances where something is going on that mimics a dementia. These can be associated with a delirium, which is often caused by some type of an infection. Most commonly in the elderly population is a urinary tract infection, or a UTI. There could also be some type of chemical imbalance in the body. Maybe there's a tumor affecting their brain, and so there's chemicals that are thrown off as a result of that. It could be related to dehydration or poor nutritional intake, something also that's very common with elderly, especially those isolated elderly, where they're not preparing meals or eating adequately. It could be related to medication that are not working well together. And that's something significant too, that a lot of people, including many physicians, think answer to problems are more medication. That needs to be scrutinized, and family and friends can help in that. Are medications causing more problems? And then depression, and all of these are scary, but untreated depression can also look like dementia. These all can be dangerous, but they all can be treated if we look at infections, chemical imbalances, poor nutritional intake, dehydration. If there's a tumor, that maybe there's options to treat and take care of that tumor. In theory, like depression, these are all treatable conditions. And it does require the involvement of a medical team and proper evaluation. Interventions sooner rather than later are really important, because a long-term untreated depression will turn into, in many cases, permanent dementia. But if there was an opportunity to treat that depression 5-10 years ago, why not take that opportunity to take care of that so that the future looks better than having to deal with progressive dementia? Again, Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. Dementia is an umbrella term with different types. Now, the specifics as it relates to each type of dementia are not relevant in this setting with this awareness initiative. They may be very relevant to your family situation, your caregiving situation, but in respect to this awareness initiative, we're not going to get into specifics about each type of dementia. However, if you are supporting someone who's living with some type of dementia and you feel it necessary to get more information, to seek out some additional support tools, we strongly encourage that you get in contact with us or do some additional search and research on your own, because that may help you as you better understand the different types of dementia and how it may be impacting your loved one or someone within your network of support. Maybe you're supporting a friend or a neighbor. And so learning more about a specific dementia may help you in that caregiving role. But again, as it relates to this awareness initiative, we could speak longer on the specific types, but it would take away from the whole purpose of why we're here and meeting today. But again, we would welcome the opportunity to talk further with you independently if you have additional questions. Let's take a look at the brain. Now, these are actual brains that you see. On the left side is what's considered a normal brain. And on the right side is a brain of somebody who was living with Alzheimer's disease before they passed away. It is significant difference that we see with these two representations of the brain. Because of that obvious difference, it shouldn't be a surprise to you or to anyone else that that person who was living with Alzheimer's acted differently. It should be no surprise that their abilities change because their brain was changing and their brain became damaged as a result of Alzheimer's disease. Here's another example. This is from a brain image, an electronic brain image. On the left side is what's considered a normal brain, a lot of red in there, which represents positive neuron activity, meaning the brain is functioning the way that it should. The different parts of the brain are communicating well. Information is transmitting to different parts of the brain as it should. On the right side is an image of a person who was living with Alzheimer's. And as you can see, there's not a whole lot of red areas in this particular image, which tells us that brain's ability to communicate effectively with itself is compromised. So again, as we know, changes are occurring within someone's brain, we should not be surprised that they act differently, that they have less ability to do things they once did. And the different types of dementia affect different parts of the brain. So again, depending upon the type of dementia, that person may be affected in a different way than, Let's say if I have dementia from Lewy body, okay, I'm going to be acting differently than the person who is living with Alzheimer's disease because a different part of my brain has been affected. But the commonality here is the brain is affected, therefore changes are likely and they shouldn't be a surprise. The most important thing as you consider your role professionally or personally is we need to be compassionate with these people. We need to show them a level of understanding because at the end of the day, they don't have control of what's happening in their brain. And I promise you this, nobody asked for Alzheimer's. Nobody asked for Lewy body dementia. It's not something that people chose. So let's keep that in mind as we think about the support that we can offer somebody. So a question that comes up is, how do I know if someone has dementia? And here's another chance for you to answer a question. Are there any obvious physical signs that someone has dementia? So if you had a lineup of people standing there, not engaging in any type of activity, but if you had a lineup of people, would you be able to tell who is living with dementia? Are there any obvious physical signs?
So Scott, while we're waiting for the group to type in the chat, I have a couple questions that are kind of related to this. So
Yes.
There's been some chat on the side here that talks about is there a possible effect that we are seeing as a result of surviving COVID with this population? And then a follow-up question or related question is, does medication help the brain function in these types of Alzheimer's? You know, you showed those images of the different brains there. Does medication assist with that, or is the medication for something else?
Yeah, so great, both very great questions and very important questions. And what I can tell you about COVID is they are still researching this, but yes, they are determining that there is and has been some negative impact on people who are living with dementia. And a lot of it comes back to the isolation. Because as we learn about ways to reduce risk factors, being socially engaged, very important and very critical. So as people are isolated because of COVID, there's already a strong possibility that if they were living with dementia already, they had already self-isolated anyways because of that fear. So now that's compounded because even getting out to the store scares people half to death, those that are vulnerable. And if they don't have a support system, but if they've been diagnosed with COVID because of it having an impact, and we know that it inflames some of the vital organs and it has an impact with regards to the heart and the lungs and other things, yes, they are now contributing COVID itself, a positive COVID case, somebody that has maybe an exacerbated or progression of dementia-like symptoms.
All right.
And Megan, anything to add to that?
No, I would agree that that is what's found. The other thing that I think was visible in this chat is there must be some research that's showed that even COVID survivors that didn't previously have dementia have seen a drop in IQ points. So in the comments, there's just the potential for more cognitive decline, perhaps, than what has previously been predicted as we looked at those demographics. There is the potential that COVID could have a bigger impact on the cognitive decline that we see with COVID spread, is also in the chat as well, Scott.
Yeah, and those are some important points to acknowledge. We do see that sometimes a life-altering event can kind of catapult dementia symptoms into the forefront. We've had people that, maybe they have a really strong reserve and they've been able to manage because maybe they were well educated. And so they've been able to cover and kind of adjust. And then they suffer a fall and there's a head injury and things happen with result to some swelling in the brain. And though they may recover from that fall with the head injury, all of a sudden dementia-like symptoms are kind of pushed full on into their reality. And so things do change. And again, with COVID, there still is that unknown factor, but we do know of the inflammation that has occurred, and now people are compromised physically as a result with lung activity, with their heart. And so, yes, we do see that things are changing, and it is an altering life event for some of those individuals. And we're going to learn more as time goes on. It does, though, speak to your own choices in many situations, if you have the choice to make sound lifestyle choices about what you're eating, if you're exercising, staying socially engaged. So there are things that we've been promoting and preaching for a long time. The more awareness, the more education, the more people are going to take into account reducing some of those other risk factors like lifestyle choice. And then to the medications, what I can tell you about the medications is there are medications that work to help treat some of the symptoms of dementia, where it may be able to stabilize some cognitive loss in the short term. In the long term, the trajectory is going to be the same as far as the progression. So medications can be helpful in the early stages. Again, the benefit to being evaluated and having that medical team aware of what's going on. Unfortunately, though, the long term is not going to improve. The disease will still progress. Now, with that said, there continues to be a lot of research. There continues to be a lot of effort to support research, and millions of dollars are going into the effort. But we are not there yet. There was a medication just within the last 2 weeks that sounded really promising. A week ago Friday, not this past Friday, a week ago Friday, the FDA said, yeah, we don't find that there's enough benefit to say this is a treatment for Alzheimer's disease. So we're back to having medications that only treat the symptoms and really don't have a long-term impact on the progression of the disease, but it might slow down the cognitive loss. So were there any answers about obvious physical signs that someone has dementia?
Well, after that nice graphic from Beetlejuice that Scott left you with, like Scott said, it would be great if there were some physical sign that could clue us in that someone is struggling with memory loss, with a form of dementia. But there are no obvious physical signs to tell us that, because like Scott says, those changes are occurring inside the brain, something we can't see. However, the common symptoms that someone might experience, such as memory loss, confusion, those problems with expression and communication, thinking and reasoning, they might affect someone's actions to the point where we might notice that something seems like they're struggling a little bit more. Their perception of a situation that might have occurred in the library might be skewed to the point where you're wondering if something more could be going on with this person's memory. It might tell you that that's a possibility and cue you in to change your responses, your reactions to help that person and support that person. Someone may have someone with them, like their spouse or a companion, maybe an adult child, that will tell you verbally, you know, the person I'm with, my loved one, does have dementia, so may need things explained a little bit differently, may need you to speak a little bit more slowly. So there could be someone with them that will tell you that the person they're with has dementia. Some people may carry something that's called a help card you're now seeing on the screen. These aren't as common, but some people will carry them. They're not widespread right now by any means. Some might be something that a caregiver will carry, like the one that you see on the far left. That one says the person I am with has dementia and gives some like tips or cues. Someone with dementia might carry one themselves. Maybe they're in the earlier stages of the disease process and they're still out and about on their own, and their family member has asked them to carry this in their wallet or their purse. Just in case they get confused, they know they can pull that out and show that to someone, like a staff member at the library. And then there's another example of a companion card too. These are available at the Aging and Disability Resource Center and at the Alzheimer's Association. Someone might even print and make their own, but it's not something that is widespread at this point. Definitely something that could be helpful as we move toward more dementia-friendly communities. The purpose, again, is to allow some communication when communication might be limited for that person with dementia. Maybe they just can't think of the words to say in that moment, but they know that they have a card to show to someone if they're struggling. Or in the instance of the companion cards, again on the far left and the far right, those are more for a loved one who's with someone with dementia to be able to indicate that the person that they're with has a cognitive impairment without having to say it out loud. This can convey the caregiver's need for some extra patience or assistance without making the person that they're with feel bad if that person is really not wanting to talk about the fact that they have dementia everywhere they go, but they still want to be active and go with their loved one into the community. So it helps preserve dignity, and that's the whole purpose of it. While there may not be a card or a companion to share what is going on, there may be many observations that you can make and respond to. Pay attention. We always encourage that. The more that you can pay attention and know that someone is depending on you to notice these things. There might be someone who looks like they're lost or confused in the library. They might appear to be searching for something and just can't find it. Might be wandering up and down the aisles. They might be slow to pull something out of their purse or their wallet. Or they might not know what to do next. Maybe they've gathered some items to check out, but they can't remember the next step in the process. They might appear to have problems speaking or understanding what you are saying. And they may repeat themselves. They may speak really slowly or really softly, or on the contrary, they may speak very loudly for our quiet library environment. They may be slow to process what is said. And again, like we talked about with the cards or a possible companion or a partner sharing that they might have dementia, we might have those direct cues too. But when we don't, that attention that you can pay and be there for that person that's struggling makes a world of difference. Because Alzheimer's disease, we talked about that being a type or a form of dementia. Because, as Scott said, that accounts for such a large percentage of cases of dementia, again, 60 to 80% of all cases of dementia, we're going to spend some time reviewing the 10 early signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. We are all individuals, so our experiences with the disease process will vary. So we'll talk in generalities. And some of this will be some of the things we've already mentioned, but we'll try to give you some examples of each of the 10 signs, again, as a review. Okay, so the first of the 10 signs of Alzheimer's disease is memory loss that disrupts daily life. A good example of this is forgetting recently learned information. So this might be someone coming to the library counter and asking a question, and then going back to maybe look for a book, look at a magazine, and coming back just a few minutes later and asking that same question. That could definitely throw you off, but that is one of the early signs of Alzheimer's disease. Number 2, challenges in planning and solving problems. This could be seen in how someone handles money. So maybe someone has a fee for overdue books and they're trying to pay that in person at the library, and they're struggling with counting change. Money is really an abstract thought process. Nickels are worth less than dimes, but they're bigger than dimes. That can be tough for someone who's experiencing changes due to Alzheimer's disease and even other forms of dementia. Another way that this could be seen would be someone trying to use a credit card instead of their library card, not being able to think through and understand that whole process. The third one is difficulty completing familiar tasks, whether at home, work, or leisure. So short-term memory is definitely challenged when someone has Alzheimer's disease, and they're relying on old memories. So they may get lost around the library or grocery store, even though it's been a familiar place to them in recent years. They can get lost when they're leaving the library, not being able to know where their car is, and may come back in very distressed. The fourth one is confusion with time or place. The person may forget where they are and how they got there. Did someone drop them off at the library? Did they come with someone and they're just in another space in the library? Or did they drive themselves? That can be something that can be really confusing to someone with dementia when they get disoriented. Another thing that we might see, especially in our dark Wisconsin winters, is that with it getting dark earlier in the day, someone may be at the library in the late afternoon and be very agitated as it gets darker because they think it's later than it is. That's something that can be quite the challenge in our Wisconsin winters. The fifth sign is trouble with understanding visual images and spatial relationships. These are vision issues that can be associated with dementia. We see reading difficulties, troubles with judging distance, and determining the color and contrast. All of those become difficult tasks. So we can see more accidents in the parking lot, maybe some fender benders or pulling up over a curb. If you have a drive-through at your library, you might see that a person hits posts or bumps into the building with their vehicle because of that difficulty with judging distance. We also see challenges inside with rugs and with transitions with flooring. To give you a good example of the rug is a lot of our buildings, especially I find in Wisconsin with winter weather, we have those dark black rugs when we enter a building to collect all the sludge, all the snow, all the everything off our feet when we walk in, off our boots. Those can look like big black holes to someone with dementia whose perception has been affected. So you might see someone who's very distressed over having to step onto that rug or trying to see if there's a way to get around it to enter the building. Similarly, with floor transitions, those floor transitions can look like steps, like from a hardwood to a carpet. So that can be a challenge as well. The sixth sign is difficulties with communication, those problems with words in speaking and or writing. They may have trouble finding the right word or following or joining a conversation on a regular basis. They may call items by the wrong name. For example, they might be trying to tell you that they're looking for a certain book, but they can't think of the word book. So they're saying a reading thing or pages with writing, and they're trying to describe what they're meaning for the word book. The next sign, misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps. They may walk away from their table at the library and forget where they were sitting, or maybe they just sit somewhere else as if they weren't sitting down before, but then they misplace the personal items that they had at the first table. Maybe they take someone else's spot and that results in a disruption in the library, or they take someone else's library materials by mistake. The next sign decreased or poor judgment. They may lose the ability to make good decisions or take proper care of themselves. You may see someone with dementia coming into the library not wearing a coat in January when it's below 0, or wearing sandals. You may see someone always wearing the same clothing, even when they're soiled. For the smaller branches of the library, it might be that the items that the person is viewing don't seem to match their previous interests, or they seem inappropriate, age inappropriate, or just something that they wouldn't have looked at before. Not common for them. The 9th sign is withdrawal from work or social activities. This can be seen as a person with dementia becomes more aware of the changes that are occurring for them. They start to withdraw for the work and social activities that they once enjoyed. They might miss regularly attended book clubs or other events at the library, or may avoid staff when they come inside, when they've previously been really chatty and really easy to engage. This kind of goes along with those changes in mood and personality, which is the 10th sign. This can be seen in confusion, suspicion, fear, anxiety, and agitation, especially when a routine that is now really relied upon gets disrupted. And they may not understand jokes, can be another sign of that change in personality as well. It's important to remember that individual experiences vary. So some people may experience one or more of these signs in different degrees. It's important to distinguish if the experiences are new for the person, or if they've been happening on a regular basis, how long. Those are things to really pick up on. If so, it could be something that's important to document and share with a family member, a caregiver, or the person themselves, and encourage them to see their doctor.
As we think about somebody who has a new diagnosis of dementia, they have core needs. As the diagram indicates, love, independence, make choices, a feeling of self-worth, and have a purpose in life. But interestingly enough, these are the same things that you and I need. We want to give and receive love. We want to take care of ourselves. We want to make our own choices, feel important and feel like we matter, and be useful and have motivation to exist. So when a person is living with dementia, their core needs haven't changed. Yet oftentimes, people assume that they're less of a person, when in fact, they're not. And that's where awareness can help them feel like they still matter and that they can still be an active part of their world, the things they've always done. If we embrace this, they can continue to belong and not isolate themselves. As well, someone who's living with dementia, they still retain some skills. They can find humor. It may not be the same way that they once used to. Maybe they interpret jokes a little bit differently because they're having a hard time processing the words, but they can still laugh. They can still enjoy things that are funny. They absolutely still respond and need that touch. That doesn't change. Even for someone who's profoundly impaired, touch still matters. They have emotions. Their spirituality, though they may practice their faith and spirituality differently, it still is important because oftentimes it's something that dates back to their earliest childhood days. It's important to them. They have long-term memory. They can have good conversations if someone doesn't have to have an expectation that they have to talk about what the weather looks like today. Their long-term memory oftentimes is intact well into the disease progression. And significantly, music still plays a part. If somebody enjoyed music and that was a part of their life earlier, it's going to play a part even as the disease progresses. And if you haven't seen the video about the Primera ballerina who's profoundly impaired with dementia, and them playing some of the music that she knew, Google the Primera ballerina and take a look at the impact that music had on her, because it hits a part of the brain that gets some of those neurons active. And it really is quite amazing the impact that music can have on people. Now, of course, if someone didn't listen to music before, it's not going to have an impact, because it might be like, what is this noise that I hear? So, but music can play a big part. Sunshine and roses, right? It does start with you. We need to put on that happy face. Make that sunshine every interaction. And I mean, this is customer service 101, but when we're dealing with and working with and supporting people who are living with dementia, it does matter how you act. It does matter what's going on with you in the eyes of that person, because they're going to interpret that. So there's a short video that I want you to take a look at. Anne's going to help us out with this. Just pay attention to the noises and the things that are going on, and most importantly, the different interactions that our actress is encountering. All right. Well, I'm not sure how the sound quality went for everybody, but I didn't hear a lot of the background noise. I heard the talking, but I'm not sure. So I would encourage those of you to maybe view that again if you didn't get the full effect with the background noise. But basically, there was a lot of background noise, and that complicates what a person with dementia is experiencing because of the background noise. So there was phones ringing at the bank, there was the beeping with all of the devices out on the street, there was horns and traffic noise, and so that does also have an impact on the experience of somebody who is living with dementia. And then in the beginning with her tea, there was milk, and she put that in the cupboard, and the tea went in the refrigerator, and so there were things that were happening, and this is all very common. And then the interactions with people in the first segment is also very common. Most people ignore or avoid an interaction like that, where the second part, they actually gave this woman a chance to succeed because they were helpful. So the important part here is, again, if there's an opportunity for you to support somebody, whether it's professionally in the libraries or personally in the grocery store, at the bank, or someone else, please challenge yourself to do that and support people and provide them that patience and understanding. And remember, sunshine and roses.
Scott, so my question while I was watching this video was, and Megan, you might answer this too, are there circumstances or settings that might exacerbate dementia symptoms? Are they, within the home versus out in the public? And maybe you answered this earlier when you were giving those library examples, but that really struck me here. She felt so calm in her own space.
Yeah, it does have a significant impact, and one of the later slides that we're going to get to does look at some of those issues a little bit more closely as far as the stimulation, because a lot of times we take it for granted, and we can kind of tune out something, or we can, have a window open and see what's going on. But yet, if there is excess noise, if there is other activities, even if something is moving, it can indeed have an impact on someone's experience. And so those will be some of the things that we are going to challenge you with looking at in your different branches, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. And thanks for that question, Anne. I was also going to talk about how Right now, I'm going to take some time talking about how our approach can diminish kind of that dementia response or that symptom of dementia, because our approach can help reduce the chances that someone will be agitated, will be frightened, will be fearful. That approach can make such a difference. So we'll spend some time talking about that, and then we'll also talk about how some of those environmental things might trigger things as well. So thanks for that question. In talking about our approach, good customer service, many of these tips are something that are already second nature to so many of you because you're good at what you do. You're good at serving people and being there for people, meeting them where they're at. But some of them might be good reminders or just kind of explain why it's extra important for someone who may be living with dementia. The first one, being calm and positive, friendly, smiling, even underneath your mask. You can see it in your eyes. Really, you can. Having that good eye contact. Those things are all so much more important when you're communicating with someone who might be living with dementia. It's also very important to approach from the front, within their line of vision. During the video that Scott shared, I don't know if you guys could see how blurred out the sides were of that woman's vision throughout her day, and how disorienting that is. But that can happen with vision changes with dementia. So their field of vision can really shrink to the point where this is kind of their viewing, and then everything else is blurry. So if you have your hands up like this and think about what it's like to not be able to see to the side, to not necessarily be able to turn quick enough to see behind you, and think about someone approaching you from the side or from behind and how that startles you. That's so much harder for someone with dementia to come back from that flight or fight response that is signaled in our bodies when we're startled that way. That can result in increased agitation and affect your interaction with them entirely, so that's really important. When you can approach from the front, that gives you an understanding of why that's so important. Reaching out and introducing yourself. Putting that person at ease, even if they should know your name because they've seen you many times, if they're questioning that at all, forgetting your name, just saying, hey, it's Megan, it's good to see you today. That can really put a person at ease and not put them on the spot of trying to recall your name. Allowing that person to take their time and having that patience, giving them time to process what you're saying and to respond to you are so critical. Getting to know the person who comes into your library, that can help you identify potential changes that they may be experiencing as time goes on. This may, of course, be more challenging in larger branches, and especially if people are not frequent visitors. But for those that are, getting to know them can be very helpful if they do start experiencing changes. So learning by listening and observing. Maybe they have conversations with their care partner and with you included, and getting to know that person through those conversations. What do you know about them and perhaps what they used to do before they retired? Or what their hobbies are, what sports teams they like, how they like fishing. You can build on comments that they make, and if there comes a time when there's a change, you'll be more in tune with that. And you'll also be more readily available to have an appropriate response that might bring them comfort if they're getting confused or agitated. If you know a hobby that they have, that switching the conversation to that can help reduce that agitation and stress in that moment. So that's a way that can be really helpful. If you have someone that's coming into the library and you either suspect that there's some memory changes happening, or maybe you start seeing them as time goes by. Some other examples of good customer service that can be even more important when interacting with someone with dementia are to never argue. We're all taught that when we serve customers, but it can be really important when you are serving someone who may have dementia. It may escalate the situation to argue with them or to tell them that their information is incorrect. The customer may become agitated or frustrated. Depending on their level of impairment, logic may not apply anymore. They may have a really hard time interpreting their own world from their perspective, so their reality will never look the same as yours. Ask simple questions and try to avoid pronouns. The reason for this is that when you are talking to someone with dementia, pronouns like he or she or it, they, that requires someone to remember what those pronouns are referring to from earlier in the sentence or earlier in the conversation. So for example, if I say, your daughter was with you last week, but I see you're by yourself today. Is she working? That would require you to remember that I'm referring to your daughter when I say she. That can be difficult for someone with dementia. So we encourage you to avoid those pronouns and use specifics as to the person you're referring to or the object that you're referring to. That can make it easier for a person with memory loss to follow the conversation and be able to stay engaged. Remembering to watch your own behaviors. What is your body language saying? What is their saying in response to yours? That can tell you a lot about your own. Think about open and closed posture and how that makes you feel when you're communicating with someone. Are you making eye contact? Are you distracted by your surroundings? Or are you focused in on that customer right then and there in that moment? Listen to what the customer is trying to say. Does it really matter if they're referring to the library by an old name, or perhaps if it used to be a different location before it was the library building? Interpret what they're saying and try to meet them where they're at, meet their need. Accepting them where they are at means helping them in their reality, which is very important. Also, when you're providing good customer service, it might be helpful to have some responses ready to go in certain situations where stress might be increased. If you have some responses that are comfortable for you to say that can help diffuse a potential situation, that can be really helpful to have ready. For example, I'll be here if you need some assistance. If you notice someone coming in that seems a little on edge, a little uncomfortable, maybe not feeling entirely secure and safe, just letting them know that you're there if they need something. Or if something happens, maybe they drop some books when they're trying to pull one out of the shelf. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. You can make light of a situation and help someone feel like what they've done isn't a big deal. It's okay, you can take care of that instead of it being a burden upon you. If you need anything, just let me know. Again, getting that person to feel comfortable. Sometimes you might have someone who has a suggestion for how the library could do things better. It may or may not be a valid suggestion or a doable suggestion, but simply just having a good response. That's a good idea. I'll have to try that, or I'll have to talk to our director about that. Great idea. Simply acknowledging a person's idea and what they have to say can be so meaningful, especially when you're talking to someone who may have some memory loss. Again, making light of something can be helpful when something has gone wrong. Between the two of us, we'll figure it out. There's always a way to have a positive response that can lighten the impact of something.
Right, so to go on that customer service is again that communication. You know, we don't want to be the monkey on the phone where they don't have any idea what's going on when we're talking to them. And so as Megan had indicated, identify who you are. Even if you're wearing a name badge, they may not have the ability to look at your face and look down, you know, at your name badge and then correlate what it says on that name badge. So identify yourself. If you know them, as Megan indicated, acknowledge that person by name. Of course, if you don't know them, still make them feel comfortable. Hey, I'm glad to see you today. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for coming in. Speaking slowly and clearly. Giving one-step direction. So if they ask where to find something, you don't want to say, well, you got to go down this way, past that third cabinet on the right, and then you take a left and it's by the blue chair in the corner. That's information overload, somebody that is dealing with some type of confusion. So one-step directions. Come with me. I'll show you where to go. And then asking one question at a time. Again, information overload sends them down a path of potential agitation, but it just could be pure frustration where they just had a terrible experience, so they can't tell somebody why it was terrible, but maybe they were quizzed and then they got asked a bunch of questions at the same time. One question at a time. And then patiently wait for a response. Now, you may need to repeat a question if they're seeming confused and they're not getting you an answer, but you do need to give them a little opportunity to answer your question. And then short, simple words and sentences. If you're well educated, you don't need to give them a dissertation. Okay, we need this to be simple, just so they can understand what it is. And then one of the most important things, speak to the person. If they have a caregiver along, then you speak to both of them, but don't focus all of your attention on the caregiver. That person still matters. So making sure you're providing eye contact to both of them. And as we see the picture on the left, this is oftentimes what happens. There's so much going on with what people are saying that it's just confusing. It could be your expression. You're busy, you roll your eyes. That's going to tell them something that they don't matter. So watch how your body language is. And again, eye contact is important. Here again, avoiding vague statements. If they ask for something, well, it's down around the corner. Well, that doesn't necessarily help if I can visualize 4 corners. And again, in their field of vision, if they see one corner, then they might think that's the corner that it's around. Emphasize keywords, turning negatives into positives. So maybe they come in and, boy, the last time I was here, and fill in the blanks as you want. Instead of dwelling on that negative, say, well, I'm really glad you're here today, and I'm available so we can make sure that we address your desires, or we get the information, or we get the materials. Again, just kind of turning that around, not dwelling. Of course, if it is serious, you want to address that. But if it's kind of a common thing that they find a negative because of something that happened, which really may or may not be reality in your world, it might be real to them. So try to turn that around into a positive. And then giving visual cues. Come with me, and kind of, motion with your hands so they can follow if they didn't completely hear you. Because there's also hearing deficits, or maybe they didn't understand what you said. Come with me and make that motion. You get to a spot for them to sit down. Motion for them to sit down. Again, avoid quizzing them. So they were here last week with their daughter, and now their daughter's not here. Don't give them 5 questions about what's going on with their daughter. Simple questions, one at a time. And then, of course, simple explanations. If they're looking for something in particular, try to be conscientious of how you're explaining it to them. Maybe you find that writing things down for them is helpful. Maybe they're looking for some materials that aren't in. And so maybe it would be helpful, because they come in every day asking the same question. Well, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for that. Well, maybe write it down and say, it's going to be here on this date, giving them that option, because maybe that's a cue that will help them. And then again, treating that person with some dignity and respect. They're not choosing to be difficult. They didn't choose and say, sign me up for dementia, I want to be the one. Not their choice. So treating them with dignity and respect. So here it's time for a change. We all need to stop thinking, that person's confused, he must have dementia. Instead, put that on yourself. Challenge yourself. I'm confused. I don't know what he needs or how I can help. Instead of how can I change that person? He's just, he's in everybody's way. Think about how you can accommodate that person. We need to be the ones changing. Again, sunshine and roses. It starts with you. Your demeanor, your presentation, how you act, your body language, it all says a lot. So what should you do now? Well, don't cry. Your mom's not here to help you, okay? We can get through this together, all right? You can take some initiatives and you can make this work. Stay calm. Slow down when things are happening, when you have somebody that's confused. Be patient with them. Engage them. Ask them simple questions. It may be unrelated to why they came to the library. Like Megan had said, find out a little bit about them, because if something happens and they're agitated, if you can talk to them about their farm, or you can talk to them about, a family member or the sports that they like, that may help resolve some issues. Again, complicated maybe in a larger branch where there's more people coming in, you don't have the opportunity to get to know people the same way. But it is something that, engaging them is important, and just making them feel comfortable. Simple instructions, calm tone of voice. If you're on the phone and you have 13 other things to do, focus on that person. Don't snap at them. Don't, be curt with them. Give them your undivided attention for that moment that they need you to do that. And challenge yourself. What are they trying to tell you? What are their needs? How can you help them? And if you can't figure that out, can you rely on a colleague or a coworker or somebody else that might be in the library that knows them? Maybe they came with a caregiver, maybe not, but you saw them communicating with somebody. So is that an opportunity then for you to also engage them in a different? So we want to get into some of the physical things around the library for you.
Okay, as we consider what we can do with what we say, our responses, our body language, we also need to think about the space, like Scott said. So consider how our environment may look to someone who has memory loss or who has dementia. So looking at these creative signs, they're definitely creative, but they may be a little difficult for someone who is living with dementia to interpret. If they're struggling to comprehend what they read, these signs might cause problems. If the signs are not traditional, what's stored in their long-term memory, they may not be helpful. So the traditional symbols that are on the top right sign are there, but the sign hangs from the ceiling and it has more focus on the word toilets, which is kind of strange if they're thinking about just the traditional sense. So the symbols are probably difficult for them to see. That's something to consider. The other ones, again, they're not the traditional symbol that someone might have stored in their long-term memory and might be confusing to them. Now here are the more common and well-recognized signs. In addition, sign placement at eye level is extremely valuable, as the visual field of someone with dementia has also declined, like we talked about. As you return to your branches, take a look at your bathroom signs to see if updates might be needed. Something as simple as a sign can make the experience much different and much more positive. And the task of being able to go to the restroom when you're out in the community is something that definitely increases confidence and independence. So for someone to be able to find the restroom on their own and utilize it, if they're still capable of doing that without assistance, can really make a person who's living with dementia, where so many things are out of their control and so many changes are happening in their life, that can just give them such confidence and such a positive experience in the library.
And I apologize, as I see we are nearing the end of our time here, which just seems to have flown by. So here again, just things that these are not traditional exit signs, something that needs to be considered. The traditional exit sign is something that is extremely valuable. And then as we look at this emergency exit, they may not understand emergency. Adding a stop sign, because exit, they might just see exit and then use that door. And especially if there's an alarm, that stop sign might make a difference. And so signage is important, as well as the physical environment. Now we have a few quick things we want to touch on here with regards to lighting. As you can see, there's a huge difference in the conference rooms and the lighting. And when people have a visual problem, that does make a difference. So you're paying attention to your signage. You're paying attention to the lighting in the areas where you're supporting people. And Megan had talked about rugs earlier, where it creates what might look like a hole, right? So the mosaic floor tile looks great. But on the right side, this is maybe what someone with dementia is really seeing. They're seeing these gaps in the floor that might be difficult to navigate. And so now they're concerned about how they're going to get from point A to point B because the floor has really got them distracted. Another thing is that, contrast, the dark chairs or the colored chairs versus a white chair. They may not even see that the white chair exists because of the fact that their vision has changed, and that contrast really makes a significant. So those are things that you can also be looking at. Are there issues within the environment that potentially could be updated to make someone's experience better? Self-service as well. This is something that we're seeing everywhere now, right? Everything is going to self-service. How easy is it actually? And if there are potential problems, where is the support staff as people are trying to negotiate and navigate the self-service kiosk for checking items out? As well, we might see a sign. They can see so that if they are flipping through their wallet or their purse, they can compare it so that they know what it is that they're looking for versus maybe pulling out a credit card, as Megan had indicated previously. There's a lot of things that are going to come up here. The word pass, I'm hoping that you will remember this. Pass, no, not giving this to somebody else. Pass, programs, activities, base. It all equals the support that you're giving to somebody who's living with dementia, as well as their caregiver. And we really wanted to take some time for some brainstorming here, but with the time as it is, you're gonna run out of time to do that. So as we talk about programs and activities, a lot of people might say, well, gosh, aren't they kind of the same thing? Well, depending upon who you are and your interpretation, sure, you might think, yeah, they are definitely the same thing. But the way I look at it as programs are different than activities because programs are looking more at a specific agenda to accomplish a set goal, where an activity is a more fun event that, you know what, it can go 3 or 4 different directions, and it's not necessarily going to change. The outcome is that someone's going to enjoy their time. So some program example. Maybe you partner with a local group and offer support groups in your buildings. Maybe it's a memory cafe, and if you're not aware of what a memory cafe is, it's a program that's set up to support a caregiver while they're able to bring their loved one living with dementia to an activity where they're not going to be scrutinized, they're not going to be looked at and frowned upon because they're invading the space of somebody else. So the purpose is to provide a safe environment for an activity while still focused on the program at hand and giving them an outlet, giving them some social engagement. The caregivers might end up communicating with each other while their loved one is participating in a particular activity. Maybe it's educational offerings that we can partner like today, but we can offer something to the community at large, whether it's with us, the ADRC, or the Alzheimer's Association. You talked about caregiver kits. What about memory kits? I believe there are caregiver kits currently that you offer, but memory kits as well, something that's appealing to somebody that may be more confused. And then virtual partnership. Maybe there's an opportunity through Zoom that you can host at one of your branches. So especially in those rural communities, people that maybe don't have technology or don't have access to Wi-Fi, they can participate in something that your branch is supporting. So some virtual partnerships, and always being culturally inclusive. If you live in an area, let's say like the Wausau community with the high population of Hmong individuals, maybe partnering with the Hmong Association to offer an activity of some sort or a program that's going to meet their needs. And then also keeping in mind, if you're hosting a program and it's intended for caregivers, can you complement that with having some activities available for that person who's living with dementia so that there isn't a barrier for that caregiver to attend?
So as Scott talked about the past, moving on to activities. This gives some nice examples, an art, music, or poetry exercise. Looking into history, offering a documentary viewing, for example. Thinking about virtual tours and how you might partner to offer those. Having a how-to activity, like making fidget blankets or activity boards. Go ahead.
Yeah, for those of you that maybe aren't familiar with a fidget blanket or an activity board, these are items designed to meet some of the needs of individuals who are confused. And a fidget blanket may be common things that they were used to. Let's say they were somebody who sewed a lot. And so maybe we have some zippers and we have some ties, or maybe we have some snaps, and we have different things that they can do, a pocket with a flap that maybe has Velcro on it. And so it may be tapping into some of those past experiences, and we can bring caregivers and those care receivers together and actually have somebody show them how to create that fidget blanket, or an activity board for some of those male customers that maybe were, crafty and they were, able to repair things and fix things around the house. Well, a lot of people I know and a lot of people I talk to, if they go out in their garage, they can find some light switches. Maybe they can find a deadbolt lock, and then they can maybe wire the key to that activity board. They can put those chain locks that we see on doors and do some different things very, very reasonably priced with a little bit of time. So as an activity, it could serve a dual purpose. Maybe you have a how-to event and you bring a group together to make the blankets and the activity boards that then can be donated to other people, or you can have the caregivers come with their care receivers, the person living with dementia, and you can have them do this as an activity to create something that's going to have some longer term benefits for them and in keeping them somewhat stimulated.
Absolutely. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, those are great options, and a lot of different ways that you could do that as an activity, like Scott mentioned. But it helps keep someone with dementia connected perhaps to a previous hobby or something that they enjoyed, or maybe even an old part of their career, for example. Other activities include recognition events, like this month is National Family Caregivers Month. So having a caregiver appreciation event of some sort, or an Alzheimer's awareness event. a brain health event in June, for example. Those are just some ideas about a recognition event or activity. Considering in-person events or virtual or drive-through in this pandemic world that we're living in, and not quite sure when more in-person events will be able to be scheduled right now. So considering what options are available virtually or some drive-through options. And thinking also culturally inclusive. I know Scott mentioned one event that had some different foods, like foods from different countries, and they had a drive-through event where people could go through and get food items that were prepared at stands. And maybe Scott, you can speak more to that, but that was a great example of a drive-through event that was culturally inclusive.
Yeah, they had a parking lot, and they had a lot of participants as well as a lot of support people there, and they had ethnic foods from around the world. And so I don't recall the exact name of it, but it was something to do with, travel the world and try some foods with us. And so they had a large parking lot. The activity booths were kind of separated. And of course, under COVID, they were all using proper, methods for dispensing with the gloves and everything. But the caregivers brought their care receivers, and they just drove through, and they stopped at each booth, and they got to try some ethnic foods from around the world. And it was a great success. And so again, it's that creativity and looking at, are there things that can be done where there can be some community partnerships that can host an event together and bring something unique to a group of people that are isolated, especially now, but even before COVID. A lot of these families were self-isolating because of the negativity that came with being out in this fast-paced world we live in. They're having trouble counting change at the grocery store counter, so they don't go to the grocery store anymore because the people behind them were sighing like, are you serious? I got to deal with this. I don't have time for this. And so that self-isolation prior to COVID was already significant. But there are things that can be catered with some creative juices that your teams can bring together and offer some opportunities for people living right next door to us, right in our community.
Absolutely. And as Scott mentioned, that self-isolating, that can affect caregivers as well. If caregivers, that primary caregiver is the only one that really provides that main level of care for that loved one with dementia, that isolates them as well. So rethinking our activities about, do activities accommodate caregivers and their loved ones living with dementia if they're that primary caregiver and really need to have that loved one with them?
So then we want to talk about space. Now, you have a unique situation because the spaces in all of your branches are very different. But that's where your teams can come together with some great ideas to look at, how can the space that you have be best utilized? And one thing we know with dementia, it affects everybody differently. Well, the same thing is kind of going to go for your space. Some of your branches may have no problem doing some of the activities where others may be much more challenged in offering additional options. And that's okay. The goal is that you're looking at it with your teams to come up with some ideas. Now, of course, again, larger branches versus smaller branches. Dedicated space may be an issue in a smaller branch. If it's not possible, are there other things that could happen? As far as like a time block, we know when COVID kind of hit, some of the stores started, dedicating, okay, from this time to this time, we're going to allow only those vulnerable or the elderly people to come in, from 7 to 8 o'clock or whatever it might be. So could there be time blocks then in place of dedicated space? But if there is dedicated space, where is it in relation to the front door, in relation to the bathroom? Are there stairs? Obviously, the access to that space is really critical because you don't want to make it difficult, because then the next time they're going to say, well, that didn't help me, because they couldn't maybe get to the space. Or if their loved one is in a wheelchair, can they easily get into the building and get to where they need to go for that activity? Resource sections, is there a possibility to dedicate a section for dementia-related materials or aging-related materials? And then in doing so, children's and or picture books. So if I'm a caregiver and I'm bringing my dad in with me and I need to spend some time looking at stuff, how easy is it to find picture books in the section that I'm going to be at? Because maybe my dad can't read, but he can surely flip through a book and look at pictures, and that might keep him occupied. So thinking about, is there a way to rethink some of that resource section? And then also the local resource. So here at the Aging and Disability Resource Center, if you're not aware, we have a really nice resource directory that's pretty comprehensive. And it's alphabetical, and it's, if you will, it's kind of replaced the old phone book, since most people don't use a phone book anymore, and most kids don't even know what a phone book is. But our resource directory is very great because people are used to the alphabet, and they can get through if they're looking for caregivers, or maybe they're looking for some transportation information. Our resource directory has a lot of great information in it, but as well information from the Alzheimer's. And for the other branches that are not in our service area, putting ADRC information out in your local community or your county. Do you have options to put some of those materials in your spaces? And then again, as we talked about the bathroom signs, looking at the bathrooms, right? Where are the light switches? Are they automatic? I used to work at the clinic, and I went into the bathroom one day, and there was a gentleman in one of the stalls, and he was thrilled that I just walked into the bathroom. Of course, he couldn't see me, but he was on the toilet long enough that the light went out, and he didn't know to stand up and, wave his hands or do anything. And so the poor man was sitting there in the dark. Obviously, our bodies all function differently. So do we have an opportunity to look at some of those things long before those automatic lights go out, before they need motion to turn back on? Same goes with the faucet, the soap dispensers, the paper towel dispensers. If they're not easy to understand, waving your hand underneath it, many people may just put their hands there for the soap, and it may or may not work, right? And hopefully it will if you just put your hands there. But then some of the faucets, you need to wave your hand. And so there's differences between the soap dispensers, the automatic faucets, and the paper towel dispensers that can be very confusing to people if they just hold their hands there. So again, looking at your space and the accessibility with the lighting, with the ease of access, those are important things that you can take away to consider. Are there small improvements that could realistically make a big difference for someone living with dementia and their caregiver? And then we talked about distractions, okay? And so kind of that squirrel, right? Every time I say squirrel, my dog perks right up and she's ready to go. It's that kind of reaction when it comes to what are the distractions that may be interfering with somebody having a good experience. Obviously, noise level, most people are accustomed to having the noise down in the library, which is great. But if it's a branch that's next to the road and there are windows that they can see what's happening outside, or maybe there's train tracks, or maybe there's other things depending upon your locations. Obviously, there are things you may not be able to change, but just being aware that, okay, you're going to host a program or an activity at 3 o'clock, but you know the train comes through at 3:15. Well, that might really take away from your activity or your program, because now you've got this outside noise that's going to distract what's going on. So planning those events, or let's say it's during the school year and you know that you're going to have a group of kids coming from the school or whatever it might be, trying to coordinate those activities to give people a chance to have less distractions. We talked about the lighting as being critical for people who have poor vision. The windows, for most people, we like windows. We like seeing what's outside. But if that squirrel is running by and you have an activity going on, you may lose everybody in your room. If you have cars that keep passing by, you may lose everybody in your room. And so thinking about, is there a way that you can, take that distraction away by a blind or a shade, or altering the way that glass looks, different things like that. Computer screens, classic to have the things floating up and down and all around, right? And so you think, oh great, we have dedicated space, we can put them in this room, and we won't let anybody in there to use the computers, but you've got 10 monitors with something floating up and down on the screen. Terribly distracting. We also see electronic signs now where you've got, it telling them something and it's scrolling across the sign. And yeah, it's convenient, but at the same time, a huge distraction. And so maybe you can't move the sign, but what about changing where somebody's facing so they're not necessarily looking at that sign? A distraction as well is people aren't going to always know to ask where the bathroom is, but they may be terribly uncomfortable thinking about having to use the bathroom. So making sure that staff, as part of like that introduction, hey, just so you know, this is where the bathrooms are located. Take that element of a distraction off the table and offer them, as we do in person, or we used to do in-person gatherings and meetings. One of the first things that the presenter is going to talk about, if it's my office space or my conference room, I'm going to tell everybody, well, the bathrooms are here, please do what you need to do and take care of it. Help your caregivers and people living with. And then acknowledging if they're alone or with a caregiver. Maybe they need some extra help and support if they're alone.
Okay, another thing to think about after thinking about all the possible programs, activities, and space is potential partnerships. Again, we don't want anybody to feel alone in the initiative to create a more dementia-friendly community. There's so many possibilities to partner with other entities to create these positive programs, activities, and use of space to promote dementia-friendly programming. It may be partnering with churches or faith communities, other service organizations like those listed here. It may be partnering with the Chamber of Commerce or community foundations. Maybe there are businesses and organizations who want to contribute to the financial cost of some programs and activities. It may be partnering with a local adult daycare or assisted living or home health agency. It might be partnering with the local YMCA or YWCA. There may be a personal trainer who wants to partner and offer some exercise or some physical activity somehow, create an event or a program or a specific activity for caregivers and recipients.
Yeah, they're getting into a lot more chair exercise activities. And again, maybe someone's not going to be comfortable, going out to a local gym, or they don't have the ability to get to a gym if there's not one in the town. But if you bring someone from the Y, or a personal trainer from a neighboring community, somebody that can offer some chair exercises, which both caregivers and their care recipients can take advantage of. And if you have a conference room or a meeting space that you could, allow 5 or 10 people to come, staying physically distanced. Again, this could also be a partnership that you broadcast something, for people if maybe you can't get someone to physically come there. And as we hope that COVID moves away, we have, again, more opportunities for in-person activities. But there are some opportunities to partner with people and collaborate in ways that maybe people wouldn't associate the library with exercising. But if people in your community have no other alternative, it might be a great way to support that community.
Absolutely. It's a way to fill a need or fill a gap by partnering with an entity that can bring that to the library, for example. Other partnerships could include with the ADRC or Alzheimer's Association in your area, or museums or galleries to offer something in the arts, whatever that might be. There are so many limitless opportunities, whether it be in person, whether it be a drive-through event, whether it be virtual, in this world we're living in now, and trying to expand and seeing what the needs are, what people are looking for, what they're able to participate in. There are opportunities out there for so many different partnerships and collaborations to further create a more dementia-friendly community in our areas.
Then a question we get a lot of times is, well, how do I advertise this? How do I reach people? Well, obviously the standards, newsletters and posters and signage and mailings, and now, of course, Facebook, because everybody's getting more comfortable with the virtual world. But as you build partnerships, your advertising opportunities triple, quadruple, maybe it's tenfold, because now you can get a blip in someone else's newsletter. You can get a poster in somebody else's location. You can get an advertisement on somebody else's Facebook page. So those partnerships have longer term, more comprehensive impacts because you can get the word out in a multitude of other avenues that you don't have to do a lot of coordination with. And so utilizing those partnerships to advertise special events, whether it be a church and getting it into a weekly bulletin or a monthly newsletter. Again, getting a poster that could be sponsored by another community organization or another partner within that community, and then strategically placing those in houses of worship or other places in the community, grocery stores. There's still a lot of people that look at the bulletin boards at the grocery stores. So who knows, that might be a way to reach some people. And then again, the mailings that maybe other entities are already sending, getting a leaflet or something else that could go along with that. So advertising, though it might seem daunting, could actually, in many instances, be limitless if there are good, solid partnerships with other people and organizations in the community. So it starts with you. Back to that sunshine and roses. Your attitude matters. What you do with this information matters. As we talked about earlier, professionally and personally, both in your own family and in your community, it does matter how you look at this, and making sure that other people are aware will continue this initiative.
And what's most important to remember is that you're not alone on this initiative. Central Wisconsin has some great support services. Each county that you're in has an ADRC. The ADRC is known for providing information and assistance and referrals to different resources, different programs. We have an extensive knowledge of those community resources that are available to individuals. We offer support services for those living with dementia and caring for someone with dementia. And we offer memory screenings for individuals to get a baseline determination on how their mind is working. We engage with communities on education and outreach as well. So those ADRCs are a great resource for you as a library. The Alzheimer's, the Alzheimer's Association, another great resources for dementia and related questions and concerns. They serve families and individuals with any form of dementia. So not just Alzheimer's disease, as sometimes people think that based on their name. They provide care consultations, education on Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, support groups, education, and the medical alert and safe return programs, in addition to having a 24-hour helpline as well. So another wonderful resource.
And as Megan indicated, the ADRCs are in every county. The Alzheimer's Association is more centrally located with their hub in Wausau, but they serve all of northern Wisconsin. So there are resources and supports in the individual communities, and it's just a matter of being comfortable reaching out and finding some of that, and oftentimes having information available, whether it's just one little card that references the Alzheimer's Association and their website and their 24-hour helpline. That may help somebody. Just knowing that in the middle of the night, if something comes up, they got someone they can call and talk to about their caregiving experience and what's happening with their loved one. Even during the day, not knowing who to call or where to call. If your teams are comfortable saying, here's a place to start, then that's what we're looking for, is helping you help them. So congratulations, you made it. And I apologize for us exceeding our time limit here by a half an hour. Thanks for your time. We do appreciate you spending a good deal of your morning with us today. And hopefully there's information that you can take away both professionally and personally. We do want you to know that we are here as a resource to support you in your efforts to continue this initiative to bring awareness to the community, to bring awareness to your customers and their family members. We need to all take this challenge and run with it so that we are better prepared as time goes on to meet the needs of those that are right next door to us, those that are living and hiding from dementia. We don't want them to hide anymore. We want them to remain or continue to be actively involved in their communities. And so we do ask that you not hesitate to reach out to us for additional information and support, and we will help and support you in any way that we are able to do that.